You've found just stories, simple, heartfelt moments from real lives, stories that remind us how connected we all are through love, loss, and hope. Get cozy. The stories are about to begin. 20-year-old Ethan sped down the deserted highway. His driving experience was limited, but he had learned to handle a car long before getting his license, back when he was a teenager. His first instructor had been his father. They used to race together on these same empty roads when they came to visit his grandmother in the village. And now Ethan was returning from his grandmother's, but not alone, and he felt truly grown up, free, independent. It was an intoxicating feeling. Music blared in the cabin, and the trunk was bursting with gifts from the village. Ethan had come to the village to help his beloved grandmother with the garden work. He felt sorry for the elderly woman. She had withered completely with age, seeming to survive on sheer willpower alone, but she simply couldn't give up her lifelong habit. Year after year, she sowed the beds, tended the plants, and harvested in the autumn. She flatly refused to move to the city, closer to her children and grandchildren. So her relatives visited the old woman in turns, helping her, chatting, and sharing news. After getting his license and buying a car, a used black Lada Priora, Ethan started coming to his grandmother's more often than the others. There were several reasons for this. Firstly, being the youngest grandchild and the only boy among 6 sisters, both full and half-sisters, he had always been his grandmother's favorite. There was a special connection between them, almost telepathic. They understood each other without words. Even now, next to his grandmother, Ethan felt the same warmth and comfort as he had in childhood. If there are mama's boys, he was certainly a grandma's boy. And secondly, she lived in this village, Chloe, the daughter of his grandmother's neighbors, a real beauty. In childhood, she had seemed to Ethan just a nasty and unpleasant girl, skinny, pale, constantly tattling on the noisy gang of boys, which included him, to her parents. The boys, at every opportunity, tried to get back at the tattletale. Sometimes they threw dry berries after her, sometimes they made up offensive nicknames and shouted them right in her face. But one day, arriving at his grandmother's for another holiday, Ethan realized everything had changed. From an awkward teenager, Chloe had turned into a dazzling girl, and her character had transformed too. She no longer complained about the boys or looked down on them. Chloe joked easily, laughed infectiously, and there were always interesting topics of conversation with her. She shone at the discos in the local club. In short, on the eve of 11th grade, Ethan realized he was head over heels in love and began courting the girl in every possible way. He would give her bouquets of wildflowers, or ride her bike to the post office, or help carry a bucket of water from the well. But Ethan was just one of Chloe's many admirers. There was plenty of competition. The girl, however, clearly favored Ryan, a boy from the next street over. This fact seemed only to fuel Ethan's feelings. He resolved to win her affection at all costs, and had not wavered from this goal for almost 4 years now. Chloe, like Ethan, entered university after finishing school. Ryan, however, stayed in the village. His father was seriously ill, and his mother couldn't manage the household or care for her sick husband alone. Without the help of their eldest son, the family would have had a very hard time, so Ryan stayed home, found a job, and continued to support his family in this difficult situation. Chloe came to the village every weekend, and the first thing she did was hurry to Ryan's. During the week, she would miss him terribly and eagerly awaited each meeting. Ethan was convinced that now he held all the cards. Ryan had stayed in the village while he, Ethan, was in the city, close to Chloe, and with a driver's license to boot. His father had even given him a car. What wasn't there to envy in a groom like that? But Chloe still saw Ethan only as a friend, and nothing more. Her heart belonged to Ryan. Ethan simply couldn't accept the beauty's choice. He didn't understand why she preferred someone else to him. He continued to stubbornly pursue her affection. "You're a very good guy," Chloe repeated to him more than once. "You'll definitely meet your love. You'll fall in love. Look around. There are so many wonderful girls. But I only need you, Ethan stubbornly replied. But that's not realistic, Chloe replied, throwing up her hands. Ryan and I are getting married soon. Ethan tried to convince her she was making a huge mistake, showered her with bouquets of roses and gifts, which Chloe at some point simply stopped accepting. He even started stalking her. He hated Ryan, even though they had played together a lot in childhood. He pointed out to Chloe all the seemingly obvious flaws of his rival, but nothing helped. After studying for 2 years at the city university, Chloe transferred to distance learning to be able to be near Ryan and help him care for his sick father. This act was completely incomprehensible to Ethan. Ethan's feelings for Chloe did not fade. The girl was right. There were always many beautiful girls around Ethan, but none of them, for some reason, aroused his interest. Ethan continued to visit his grandmother often, not just for her sake, but for Chloe's too. Simply seeing her, even from afar, admiring her light step, her shiny dark hair, her huge green eyes, that was already a kind of happiness for him. It was just a shame that Chloe now completely avoided him, seemed even a little scared, tried to keep her distance. He had, of course, overdone it with his persistent courtship. But Ethan wasn't going to give up now either. A truly insidious plan had matured in his mind. He decided to work on Ryan. He planned to show up at his job during the week with a couple of tough buddies carrying bats and have a serious talk. If he could scare Ryan and force him to break up with Chloe, who knows? Maybe then the girl would finally notice him. After all, she'd need support, someone to be there for her, and he, of course, would be right there at the right moment, ready to offer his shoulder. These were the thoughts swirling in Ethan's head as he pressed the gas pedal to the floor. The road was smooth and empty, allowing for decent speed. The guy felt like he wasn't driving, but flying above the ground. The forest pressed in on both sides of the highway. The leaves were already touched with gold. Soon the trees would be dressed in gold and crimson. Ethan hoped that by then, Chloe would finally be his. Of course, the guy understood that his plan, to put it mildly, was dishonest, even despicable. But he firmly believed that in love, all's fair. Chloe had to belong to him, period. Ethan had been used to getting what he wanted since childhood. It had always been that way. Suddenly, the guy noticed a tiny dark dot in the distance. It detached itself from the edge of the forest and rapidly approached the highway. Ethan slowed down. Maybe it was an animal crossing the road? Judging by the size, a large one. Twilight was already deepening. It wasn't easy to make anything out ahead. The distance between Ethan's car and the strange object was quickly closing. Soon the guy realized. It wasn't an animal. A child was standing on the shoulder. It was incredible. To the nearest settlement, 50 kilometers to the city, the same distance. A completely deserted place. How could a little kid be here? Lost? Ethan stopped the car next to the child, opened the door, and looked him over carefully. He was clearly in a state of shock. A disheveled, frightened boy of about 10, trembling violently. His clothes were crumpled and torn in places. The child's face seemed vaguely familiar to Ethan. "What happened?" he asked the boy. He tried to answer, but only a choked wheeze came from his throat. Ethan understood. It was from intense fear. "What's wrong?" the guy repeated, trying to speak as gently and kindly as possible. And then the boy burst into tears. Tears streamed from his eyes. He cried, shaking uncontrollably, though it seemed he was trying with all his might to hold back the sobs tearing through him. Ethan's heart ached with pity for this terrified child. Poor thing. He must have gotten lost, been through a lot of fear. The guy walked up to the boy and did something completely out of character. He tightly hugged the kid, pulled him close. The child immediately went limp in his arms and sobbed with renewed intensity. Ethan stroked the boy's head, repeating that it was all over now. Everything would be all right. "No, it's not over!" The boy suddenly looked up at him. "Mom's there! Uncle Alex is holding her captive, and now that I ran away, he'll kill her." What? An unpleasant chill ran down Ethan's spine. The theory about a boy lost in the woods, which had so neatly formed in his head, crumbled to dust after those words. Everything was much more serious. If, of course, the boy was telling the truth. He took us away and kept us in a cage for a long time. Mom helped me escape, but he came back when I was leaving. I heard him coming towards the cabin. Now Mom will be in trouble because of me. A forest cabin. Cages. Ethan couldn't process what had happened yet, but it all sounded horrifying. The guy realized he might be in danger himself. What if that mysterious Uncle Alex was about to burst onto the road in pursuit of the child? "Let's call the police," Ethan suggested to the frightened boy. "They'll come, and you can tell them everything, okay?" "Yes, hurry!" The boy was in a panic. He was clearly extremely worried about his mother, restless with fear. Ethan looked at the child more closely. Large gray eyes, a slightly upturned nose, a scattering of freckles on a tanned face. Of course, the guy remembered where he had seen this boy. Just a couple of weeks ago, a woman and child had disappeared in the city. They had gone to the cinema and hadn't returned home. All the lampposts were plastered with their photos. Their pictures constantly appeared online. And then, as often happens, the news lost its urgency. There was a major school fire in the city, and another high-profile incident. Now everyone was only talking about that. The search for the woman and child continued, but it no longer caused the same stir as before. And now, standing before Ethan was that very boy, whose photos had recently been everywhere. The guy even remembered his name. "Is your name Sam?" Ethan asked. "Yes," the boy nodded. "Please, call the police quickly. Mom doesn't have much time. He'll get angry." Ethan, without losing a second, dialed the number and briefly explained the situation to the dispatcher. He asked for a patrol car to be sent, explaining that a woman, the mother of the boy he had found, was presumably in danger in the forest. He could only give his location approximately, but he was assured that his cell phone signal had already been traced and located, so they would be found. All that was left was to wait. Ethan invited the boy to sit in the car. The child settled into the passenger seat next to the driver. "Maybe you want a chocolate bar?" Ethan remembered the untouched bar in the glove compartment. Sam shook his head negatively. It was clear he wasn't in the mood for sweets. Ethan saw the terrible state the boy was in from the stress he had endured and his anxiety for his mother. He desperately wanted to distract the child, to somehow alleviate his suffering, but he didn't know how to act in such situations, and so he just sat silently beside him, putting an arm around Sam's thin shoulders. The boy, despite his young age, was a real hero. He had managed to escape, find his way through the forest, reach the road, and call for help. Ethan looked over Sam's head at the trees from which he had emerged onto the highway. What if that same Uncle Alex was watching them from there now, waiting for the right moment to pounce? Ethan was constantly on alert, ready at any moment to floor the gas pedal and speed away from this dangerous place. Finally, flashing lights appeared in the distance. The police! Ethan breathed a sigh of relief. Only now did he realize how tense he had been the entire time. 2 patrol cars and a Gazelle van with a small squad pulled up. They were in helmets and bulletproof vests, tall, strong, commanding respect. Uncle Alex definitely wouldn't be able to handle men like these. "See, everything will be all right now," Ethan said encouragingly to Sam, patting him on the back. He looked at the people in uniform with eyes full of hope. 2 men in plain clothes took the boy aside. They were asking the child questions, likely finding out the details of what had happened and clarifying the location of the cabin where his mother was left. Finally, a group of police officers headed into the forest. Sam, Ethan, and a few police officers remained on the road. All they could do was wait. Ethan watched the boy, who didn't take his eyes off the forest. A woman in uniform approached Ethan, introduced herself as a captain, and informed him that she needed to take his statement. The guy nodded. He understood that he had become part of this story and couldn't just leave now. Time dragged on agonizingly. An ambulance arrived. Sam was taken inside, likely for examination by the paramedics. "No, I'm not going anywhere," the boy's voice suddenly rang out. "I'm not going anywhere without Mom." Ethan understood that they wanted to take Sam to the hospital, but he couldn't leave without making sure his mother was all right. And Ethan understood him perfectly. The child jumped out of the ambulance and ran over to Ethan. Ethan took Sam's hand. They stood together on the shoulder, looking into the forest. It seemed calm, ordinary, unremarkable. Ethan had driven past this place many times during the 2 weeks the boy and his mother had spent in the cabin, and he couldn't even imagine that somewhere in there, behind the trees, something so terrible was happening. Finally, police officers emerged from the forest. First came those in helmets and bulletproof vests. They hurried towards their Gazelle van. 2 strong guys were leading a man, stout, wearing a stretched-out red sweater and sweatpants with baggy knees. Ethan realized this was the Uncle Alex, but he couldn't make out his face. The man's hands were cuffed behind his back, making him walk practically doubled over. The boy squeezed Ethan's hand tighter. He watched the man in the sweater with a frightened gaze until he was pushed into the back of the Gazelle van. The Gazelle van was already pulling away when 2 more police officers came out of the forest. They were helping a slender woman with large gray eyes, exactly like Sam's, walk. "Thank God she's alive!" Sam rushed to the woman and hugged her tightly around the waist. She hugged her son back. They both sank into the grass and just sat there, looking at each other in silence. The police didn't disturb them, understanding the importance of this moment. Ethan watched the reunion of mother and son, and his heart was filled with a variety of emotions. The guy didn't immediately notice the tears rolling down his cheeks. It was a release of the emotions that had overwhelmed him all this time. So much had happened. It was incredible. Right before Ethan's eyes, the plot of a real, not fictional thriller had unfolded. The story ended happily, but the realization of what could have happened sent a chill down his heart. The woman and the boy got up from the grass and, embracing, headed towards the ambulance accompanied by the police. Passing Ethan, Sam touched his hand and quietly said, "Thank you." Ethan just shook his head. What was there to be thankful for? What special thing had he done? Just called the police, that's all. And then the guy's eyes met the woman's, the boy's mother. A beautiful face, regular features, and a smile. A wonderful, gentle smile. Looking at her, it was hard to believe how many trials this woman had endured. She had spent several weeks in captivity and had just escaped mortal danger. But from her appearance, you couldn't tell at all. Ethan suddenly felt a strong desire to talk to her, to find out the details, to ask if they needed any help. But the woman and Sam were already being led to the ambulance. As she got in, Sam's mother suddenly turned back and smiled at him. The guy felt as if he had been struck by lightning from head to toe. It seemed that this smile had made an even greater impression on him than the entire story. Ethan understood that this episode would now remain in his memory forever. The city was talking again about the story that had already begun to fade from memory. The woman and boy, Christine and Sam, had been found. What had happened to them was a ready-made plot for a suspense thriller. Mother and son had become victims of Alex, a man with a psychiatric diagnosis. Many of Alex's acquaintances didn't even suspect his illness. He had friends, a job, he led a perfectly ordinary life. Yes, the 36-year-old man lived with his mother and didn't have a girlfriend, but nowadays, that didn't seem extraordinary. As it turned out, Alex had seen a photo of Christine on social media and instantly fallen in love with this beautiful woman. The presence of a child didn't bother him. The man tried to win the beauty's favor. He wrote her long confessions, waited for her by her building entrance with flowers. But Christine, first politely and then more sharply, asked him to leave her alone. Alex couldn't accept the rejection. Whether it was a peculiarity of his character or a manifestation of his illness, the man was determined to get what he wanted. He built a cabin in the forest, prepared everything carefully, even insulated the walls, planning to keep captives there in winter too. And then he kidnapped Christine and Sam when they were returning from the cinema. Mother and son were searched for everywhere. Theories were put forward that they might have been taken abroad, but all this time they were very close by. "He kept us in cages," Christine said in one interview. "He didn't touch us, didn't hit us, didn't threaten us. He brought food, cared for us in his own way, talked to us a lot. But we were, of course, afraid of him. I understood that this person was unwell and anything could be expected from him. So, as soon as the chance arose, I helped my son escape, and he brought help. Christine and Sam became famous throughout the country. They were invited to talk shows in Moscow. Ethan was also called for these shows and interviews. Of course. After all, it was he who had found the frightened boy on the road. But the guy refused, not wanting the fuss around himself. He watched Christine, looked at her photos, admired her on screen. Yes, Alex could be understood. There was something captivating about this woman. Not just obvious external beauty, but also charm, allure, charisma, some elusive spark. And then, after a few weeks, this striking story, as often happens, faded into the background, was forgotten. New topics for talk shows and scandalous headlines appeared. And then, about a month after all the events, Christine suddenly messaged Ethan. She had probably gotten his number from the police. The woman thanked the guy for his help and suggested meeting to talk about what had happened. Of course, Ethan gladly agreed. He really wanted to see this woman, hear her voice, learn all the details firsthand. Unlike most people, the guy understood that he would never forget this story. He often remembered Christine's smile and the feelings it evoked. And sometimes he dreamt of Sam, just as he had burst out of the forest, disheveled, frightened, dirty, and crumpled. Ethan really wanted to know how Sam was doing now. The boy didn't appear on talk shows, and little was written about him in articles. Obviously, Christine was protecting her son from excessive attention, and that was understandable. At the appointed time, Ethan arrived at the restaurant where Christine had arranged to meet. He saw her immediately. The woman was sitting at a table in the far corner, gazing thoughtfully out the window. Long chestnut hair framed a delicate face with regular features. A dark turtleneck and tight jeans emphasized her graceful figure. Beautiful, composed, a little detached. At the sight of this woman, some vague feelings stirred in Ethan's soul. Nothing romantic, although Christine's appearance could certainly have evoked such impulses. Ethan still only dreamt of Chloe, but Christine clearly attracted him, intrigued him, occupied his thoughts. "Good afternoon," Ethan said politely, approaching closer. A strange awkwardness suddenly came over him, and when the woman raised her gaze of amazing gray eyes to him, the guy seemed to even blush. That hadn't happened to him when talking to girls in a long time. "Hello," Christine smiled charmingly. "Finally, I can thank you in person. But I didn't do anything special, I just called the police. Your son now, he's a real hero." "Well, how to put it?" Christine's face became serious. "Sam, before he met you, he ran out to the road in another place. He saw 2 or 3 cars. He waved his hands, trying to attract attention, calling for help. But they drove past. But you stopped." Ethan shook his head in shock. He simply couldn't comprehend it. How could anyone ignore a small child's plea for help? He could perhaps understand if people were afraid of an adult man on a deserted highway, but a 10-year-old boy. Christine seemed to read his thoughts. "It's not surprising," she said quietly. "People don't need extra problems. Maybe they thought the child was a decoy and a gang would jump out of the forest, or they were afraid of something else. But you, if you hadn't stopped, who knows what he would have done to me." Seeing that Sam managed to escape, he started acting very strangely. I had never seen him like that. Christine started talking about Alex. She didn't look like a victim at all. In her gray eyes, Ethan saw contempt, hatred, but not fear. There wasn't a hint of the horror she had endured. It seemed Christine was either an incredibly strong woman or an amazing actress capable of hiding her true feelings. "He didn't cause you any physical harm?" Ethan asked. This question had tormented him all these weeks. In numerous interviews, this topic was tactfully avoided. Christine only spoke about being kept in cages with her son. Alex's cabin was shown in one report. Ethan had seen these cages. Essentially, they were part of a room fenced off with bars, with a solid brick partition in the middle. In the smaller section, for the boy; in the larger one, for Christine. In the corners, he noticed inflatable mattresses with blankets and pillows. To imagine that mother and son had spent several weeks in such conditions was horrifying. Well, how to put it? Christine paused. Physically, no. He never hit us, didn't even touch us. He wanted to win my affection through peaceful means. He talked to us a lot, to me, tried to please me. Sometimes he even brought dinner from an expensive restaurant. But I could see his patience wearing thin each day. He was becoming more and more irritated, angry, even insane. I felt that the climax was near. A chill ran down Ethan's spine at these words. He suddenly felt all the helplessness and powerlessness that Christine had experienced in the cabin, her fear for herself, and most importantly, for her son. You asked about harm, Christine continued. In a physical sense, no. But how this incident will affect my son's psyche and character, even doctors don't know that. How is he now? Ethan asked. Sam's fate worried him deeply. The guy was concerned about the boy, hoping he was all right. He seems okay now, but Sam still sees a psychologist. The sessions help, of course, but sometimes my son wakes up at night. He has nightmares, though he tells me he doesn't remember the dreams. So, of course, this situation left its mark. And for that, only for that, I hate Alex. If it weren't for what Sam is going through now, I would even feel sorry for him. A sick person, strong feelings. He couldn't handle it. And besides, he sincerely believed he was doing what was best for himself and for me. What? Ethan couldn't believe his ears. Christine had just expressed pity for Alex. In the interviews, she had acted completely differently. Maybe I'm partly to blame myself, Christine continued. I saw that he fell in love with me at first sight. He didn't attract me personally. He wasn't my type of man at all. But, like any woman, I liked to indulge my vanity. So sometimes I smiled at him. Sometimes our eyes met. His reaction was pleasant. He would blush nicely, get flustered, and his eyes would literally light up with delight. Knowing that someone is losing their head over you, it really boosts your self-esteem. That's important for any woman, especially after a failed romance. But the press wrote that he saw you on social media. It was presented as a cautionary tale about the dangers of online dating. Actually, it wasn't quite like that, or rather, not like that at all. Will you tell me? Christine smiled. Let's switch to you. I know I'm about 10 years older than you, but when you address me formally, I feel like a complete old woman, like your teacher or an elderly neighbor. Ethan nodded and repeated his question, slightly changing the wording. So, will you tell me? To you? Yes, I just need to talk to someone. Looking at you for some reason, I'm sure you won't take this story to the press or gossip about it on every corner. No, of course not. I just really want to know how it all happened. I think about it a lot. About you. About Sam. It's not surprising. You became part of this story too, an important character. Of course, I'll tell you everything, if you have time, because it will take a long time. Ethan assured her he was ready to listen until morning, and the woman began her story. Christine became a mother early. After her 3rd year of university, she went to the seaside for the first time without her parents, with friends from university. The beach, night discos, fun, alcohol. There, Christine fell in love for the first time. With whom? With an older man, about 15 years her senior, but he was incredibly handsome, erudite, and gallant, and importantly, he had money. Christine wasn't materialistic, but money allowed Victor to court her beautifully. Restaurants, expensive entertainment, gifts, all this combined with the man's charisma completely turned the young Christine's head. The man didn't hide that he was married. He had come to the resort town on a business trip. Some important conference was taking place there. Christine was, of course, upset at first, but then she decided to live in the moment, take everything she could from him, not to spoil these wonderful days with thoughts of something serious and insurmountable. However, the evening before parting with Victor, the girl couldn't help but cry. She understood that tomorrow, the man would fly back to his distant city, to his wife and children, and they would never see each other again. Christine would be without his blue eyes with a sly squint, without his charming smile, without his gentle, strong hands, without his scent that made her heart sweetly flutter and her head spin. "Well, don't cry, we had such a good time." Victor awkwardly stroked Christine's back. Comforting crying girls was clearly not his strong suit. The man couldn't find the words to soothe his young lover. "Give me your number. I'll call sometimes just to hear your voice." In reality, Christine dreamed of more. She hoped that in time Victor would realize the strength of his feelings for her. But for that, there needed to be some kind of communication, even if just by phone. That wouldn't be a good idea. Victor tried to speak gently, but Christine felt him tense up completely after her request. "Everything that happened here stays here. A holiday romance, you know. It happens." Christine looked up at the man who had seemed like an ideal just a moment ago. He said, "holiday romance," in such a way that it immediately became clear to the girl. For Victor, this was a common occurrence, and she was far from his first girl. Christine's eyes seemed to open. It looked like Victor had similar relationships on every business trip. The girl found the strength to break free from his embrace, turned around proudly, and left. Of course, it was a bitter disappointment. First love, and such an ending. But Christine coped. She got through it. However, this was not the end of the story yet. Returning home, Christine realized she was pregnant. That's where the real shock was. Seeing 2 lines on the test, she was probably truly frightened for the first time in her life. Icy fear gripped her heart. What to do now? Difficulties loomed ahead, explaining to her parents, rebuilding her whole life, changes in her body. And yet Christine firmly decided to have this child. That's how Sam appeared. In the maternity ward, holding the tiny warm being in her arms, Christine understood. It had all been worth it. The arguments with her parents, the friends who didn't understand, the difficult pregnancy. Here he was, her gift, looking at her with trusting gray eyes. For him, she was the whole world. Of course, Christine's parents helped a lot. They supported her both physically and financially at a time when their daughter was so vulnerable. But she had to endure their constant moralizing and lectures. They simply couldn't grasp that Christine had become an adult, a mother herself now. To them, she remained a small, naive girl. So Christine, as soon as she had the chance, rented an apartment for herself and Sam. She transferred to distance learning, found a job, and moved out of her parents' house. At that moment, the woman finally felt truly free. Life gained new colors. Sam grew up, becoming more independent and sensible. Christine could talk to him about any topic. Mother and son cared for each other and enjoyed life, together and separately. Christine met with friends. She had romances. She wasn't planning anything serious. She and Sam were good together. They didn't want to let anyone else into their cozy world. Romantic relationships were necessary for Christine to maintain her mood. Thanks to male attention, compliments, admiring glances, she felt like a woman, beautiful, desired. She needed it like air. It was likely the old trauma from meeting Victor. Christine had truly fallen in love then, and he had made her feel like just one of many. So now Christine strove to feel unique, the only one needed. This was what played a cruel trick on her when she met Alex. They met at one of the popular quiz games in the city. People, friends, acquaintances gathered in teams. The meetings were held in restaurants or cinemas. The host gave tasks, guessing films by dialogue, songs, or performers by description. There were many tasks, all fun, intriguing, unexpected. Christine enjoyed discussing options, finding solutions, arguing in the company of like-minded people. Their team never took first place, but they weren't at the back either. The core of the team was constant. The ideological leader was Helen, Christine's colleague, who had introduced her to the quiz. With her were always her quiet neighbor Sarah and her husband Serge. The other participants changed. Some, like Christine, appeared irregularly, but came when they had time. Alex became such a newcomer. Seeing an unfamiliar face at the latest game, Christine became interested. The man looked a little older than her, somewhat stout, with short curly hair, wearing a bright shirt and colorful shorts, with a fleshy nose and small, attentive eyes. There was something slightly feminine about his appearance. Overall, he seemed awkward, funny, but seemingly harmless. He resembled either a hamster or a Pekingese. Usually in movies, such characters have a light disposition and a good sense of humor. Alex indeed turned out to be a kind and cheerful person. He joked a lot, guessed most of the answers, helped the team take an honorable 4th place. Pleasant, easy to talk to. Christine, of course, couldn't help but notice the impression she made on him. Alex, when he thought no one was looking, literally devoured Christine with his eyes, openly admired her, studied her. Sometimes their eyes would accidentally meet, and then the man would immediately look away and seem embarrassed. It was pleasant. Although Alex did not attract Christine at all in a romantic sense. She liked a different type, for example, like Arthur, with whom she had just broken up and was still upset about. He had left her for another woman, young, beautiful, with long legs and a slender waist. Christine had seen her, and yes, she was a real beauty. Again, Christine felt rejected and depressed, an unpleasant feeling. She had been happy with Arthur, but she hadn't truly loved him, just lived in the moment. So the breakup hurt not so much her heart as her self-esteem. And Alex, with his eyes burning with admiration, was now unknowingly boosting that self-esteem. So Christine deliberately added fuel to the fire. Sometimes she smiled at Alex, sometimes she praised him for a correct answer, and sometimes she would casually touch his shoulder as if reaching for something. He would flinch each time at these touches, as if he'd been shocked. This reaction. Christine was playing, and she enjoyed this state. Watching the effect her accidental gestures had on Alex was a great pleasure for her. At the end of the evening, everyone stood on the porch, not wanting to leave. They discussed the game, joked, but tomorrow was work, and people started saying goodbye. The crowd gradually thinned out. As it happened, everyone was in pairs, with husbands, boyfriends, sisters, like Helen and Sarah. Only Christine, as usual, was alone, and Alex was too. It turned out Sarah had invited him. They worked together and often crossed paths in the smoking area. But Sarah, as always, was leaving with her sister and her husband. So Alex and Christine were the unpaired ones. "Need a ride?" Alex asked, and hope shone in his eyes. "I have my car," Christine smiled. She felt her power over this man. He seemed ready to carry out her every command, but she wasn't going to cross the line. Yes, it was very pleasant to feel such influence over a man, but why openly flirt if Alex was completely not to her taste? Yes, he was kind, funny, peculiar, but no, there could be no relationship between them. "Oh, okay," Alex sighed disappointedly, "but we'll see each other again, right?" "Well, quiz games happen about twice a month, sometimes more often," Christine replied evasively and got into her car. She was already looking forward to the evening drive through the city, when there were few cars and pedestrians on the roads, and the lights shone all around. She would put on her favorite music, open the windows to let the wind blow through the cabin, and just fly forward. A perfect end to the evening. Christine missed the next quiz game. There was a lot of work, and she had also promised Sam a trip to the zoo a long time ago. For some reason, she was sure Alex would definitely come, and not just for the game. And indeed, in the photos from the group, posted a few days later, Alex was there. In some pictures, he had a somewhat lost and disappointed look. Or maybe Christine was just imagining it all. And then, 2 weeks later, there was another game, and this time Christine decided to go. There were no urgent matters. Sam's holidays had started. Things were settled at work. Why not meet up with friends? The game was held in one of the city bars. Christine was a little late, caught in traffic. When she entered, everyone was already there. Alex saw her, and his eyes lit up with joy. Christine pretended not to notice, greeted everyone, and took a seat. This time, Alex was much more active. He no longer hid his gaze, examining Christine, paying compliments, trying to help, bringing a drink, moving a chair. and when the waitress took a long time to bring her order, he caused a real scene. Everyone in the company noticed Alex's obvious interest and started making harmless jokes about it. If such attention had flattered Christine the last time, now it became burdensome and irritating. The woman tried to remain detached, cold, but polite. It was her own fault. She shouldn't have practiced her charms back then. But Alex, it seemed, didn't understand hints. He had swapped places with someone and was now sitting next to Christine, repeatedly, accidentally touching her hand. Christine could barely wait for the game to end, said goodbye, and hurried to the parking lot. This time, she declined her favorite walk in the park with a large group. But Alex was there. He wouldn't have left her alone. It was awkward to refuse him rudely in front of everyone, but she wasn't going to tolerate his persistence either. He was waiting for her in the parking lot. It was already dark, so Christine didn't immediately notice Alex by her car. The woman even flinched in surprise when she heard his voice. "Can you help me?" "What?" Christine tried to hide her irritation. She had skipped the walk because of him, and here he was, asking for help. "My car's in the shop. I'm on foot today. Can you give me a ride downtown? It's on your way anyway." It seemed to Christine that she had seen Alex with car keys earlier that evening, but maybe she was just mistaken? "All right, sure." Christine smiled politely and opened the door, inviting him to get in. On the way, Alex didn't stop talking, rambling about everything, clearly trying to find a topic that might interest Christine. But she remained cold and distant, only nodding occasionally, not engaging in conversation. She felt uncomfortable next to Alex. At their first meeting, he had seemed interesting, lively, an extraordinary creative personality, someone not afraid to be funny. Now, he just looked strange and awkward. She had hooked him. Christine understood that perfectly. Alex used every second of the ride to impress her, going out of his way, even sweating. A pathetic sight, of course. But Christine tried not to show her true feelings, politely smiled at his jokes, answered monosyllabically, pretended to be focused on the road. And she waited for the moment when she could finally drop him off. Alex's presence was oppressive. "I'll drop you off here. I need to turn onto my road further on." Christine parked near a deserted bus stop. Alex clearly didn't want to part. He kept sitting and talking, looking at her desperately with his small eyes. He was close to panic. It looked very strange. Christine had never encountered anything like it. How could she politely get rid of this lovesick chatterbox without offending him? "I have to go," she interrupted him, glancing at her watch. "My son is waiting at home." Perhaps mentioning her child would cool Alex's ardor a bit, and he would understand that she wasn't just a beautiful girl for casual relationships, but a woman with a son. "So you have a son?" Alex exclaimed. The admiration in his eyes didn't lessen. On the contrary, it increased. "Yes, and he's home alone right now. He's called several times already." "Go, of course." Alex reached for the door handle, but then turned back and asked, "What about a husband? Do you have a husband?" "No, I'm single," Christine answered automatically and immediately regretted it. She should have lied and said she had someone. Otherwise, she had just given Alex a reason for further actions. "See you around." The man smiled broadly and finally got out of the car. Christine pressed the gas pedal to the floor with relief. No, she wasn't going to meet Alex again. To avoid running into the persistent admirer, Christine stopped going to the quiz games. Helen, of course, often invited her, but Christine constantly found excuses. It was a shame, of course. She liked spending time with those fun people. But now Alex had become a regular on the team. "Alex is constantly asking about you," Helen, her colleague and friend, shared one day. "He keeps trying to get your number. I promised to ask if I could give it to him." "So?" "No!" Christine exclaimed. "Absolutely not!" "Well, it's your call," Helen said. "But he seems like a decent guy. He works, he's kind, generous, has a sense of humor, and it looks like he's seriously fallen for you. He's always trying to find out things about you from us, sort of casually. But nothing gets past me." Helen, please tell him I have a boyfriend, Christine asked. He shouldn't even hope. He's just not my type, you know? I understand, of course. Did you stop going to the quiz because of him? Christine thought for a moment and nodded. She was tired of hiding the truth. I should tell Sarah to stop inviting him, Helen said thoughtfully. He's a useful team member, of course. He knows a lot. But my friend is more important to me. He works with Sarah, right? Yes, her colleague in the design department. A little more time passed, and then one day Helen announced that Alex was no longer showing up at the quiz. He had missed several games already. He realized you weren't there and seems to have lost interest. Looks like he only came because of you. So come back. There's nothing to be afraid of. But Christine was in the midst of a new romance at the time with a handsome and well-built guy, a little younger than her. They had recently met at the gym. Tall, fit, stylish, exactly the type she liked. So now Christine's evenings were taken up with dates with Max. She didn't have time for the quiz. But Alex still found a way to contact her. He found her page on VKontakte and started. He went through and didn't hesitate to like every single photo. And now every day he sent messages, wishing her happy holidays, good morning, sending cute pictures, kittens, flowers, hearts, just like a teenager. Christine, of course, didn't reply. Any normal person would have understood that it was enough. They didn't want to communicate with him. It was time to stop. But not Alex. And then one day Alex sent a message suggesting they go to a movie premiere. He offered to bring her son along too. He wanted to meet him. Christine replied that she was in a relationship, and Max, her boyfriend, probably wouldn't like that. After that, Alex didn't make contact for a couple of days. Christine thought it was all over. But no, the situation only got worse. One evening, leaving the office, Christine ran into Alex, smiling broadly. It was December, freezing outside. It was unknown how long Alex had been standing by the office gates, waiting for her. His fleshy nose was red. The huge bouquet of roses in his hands was covered in frost. But he seemed not to notice the cold. At the sight of Christine, his eyes shone with an almost puppy-like delight. Christine didn't take the flowers and very sharply asked him to leave her alone. Yes, she had to hurt the persistent admirer, but he didn't understand otherwise. I will fight, Alex said quietly, looking sadly at Christine. I know you have to fight for love, and everything will be all right. Christine sighed heavily and walked to her car. The last thing she needed was for him to actually start fighting for her. Alex went quiet for a while. For about a month, he didn't make any contact, and Christine relaxed, even forgot about him, deciding the problem was solved. Christine had a wonderful New Year's holiday. She went to a ski resort with Max and Sam. They walked, sledded, built snowmen, played snowball fights. Under Max's guidance, Christine even learned snowboarding and was very proud of it. But good things end quickly. The holidays were replaced by weekdays. Christine returned to work and routine. One evening, Max called her. He was on a business trip in another city. What's going on? The man's voice sounded strange, either upset or confused. Everything seems fine, Christine replied, not understanding anything. It seemed to her that she was being accused of something. But what? Her conscience was clear. So, it's okay to see someone else while your boyfriend is on a business trip? What are you talking about? I'm not seeing anyone. Don't lie, I trusted you so much and you... But I can explain. I've already been sent your photos. It's useless to deny it. There's nothing more to say. Max hung up, and Christine sat over her report for a long time, trying to collect her thoughts. And only upon returning home did she understand what was going on. Going to her VKontakte page, she saw a new message from Alex. Photos from our date. I love you, darling. Christine read the caption under the folder aloud. The woman clicked on the icon and gasped. Before her were pictures. In them, she herself was posing in Alex's arms, and he was looking at her lovingly. Christine was smiling charmingly, Alex was gently hugging her, and in some photos, they were even kissing. Christine had never been to these places, and certainly had never kissed Alex, but the pictures looked astonishingly realistic. Someone had very skillfully edited the photos using some software, clearly more powerful than Photoshop. Alex works in the design department, as Helen had said. Perhaps he was capable of even more than that. But why? Why did he do it? And sent the photos to Max. Apparently, she would have to tell Max about the obsessive admirer who was harassing her. Alex was now truly frightening Christine. Before this, he had only been irritating and unpleasant. But after the photo incident, he was frightening. His attachment seemed like an obsession. And his mental health, it raised serious questions for Christine. A normal person doesn't behave like that. At this moment, a new message arrived from Alex. Just look how great we look together. I can't stop admiring our photos. Christine called Max, tried to explain, but he didn't want to listen. It was hurtful. If Max had valued and loved her, he wouldn't have given up so easily. Even this strange Alex was fighting for her like that. Nothing stopped him. Perhaps Max had never had real feelings for her, and honestly, lately their relationship had become cool. The trip to the resort improved the situation for a short time, but overall the relationship had run its course, and she had to admit it. Christine was alone again. She blocked her VContact page to stop receiving messages from Alex. She even changed jobs, not only because Alex occasionally waited for her outside the office, but also because she found a place with a better salary. Christine no longer went to the quiz. Communication with old acquaintances gradually stopped. The woman had no time. Such a period had arrived in her life. Work, son, apartment renovation. Life became a whirlwind. Alex, to Christine's great relief, finally disappeared from her radar. Now he didn't know where to look for her. Out of sight, out of mind. Christine sincerely hoped that the man had found someone else and was now pouring his unspent tenderness onto that lucky woman. A few more months passed. By that time, Christine had almost forgotten about Alex. She had a new life, new worries and troubles. On that warm autumn evening, Christine decided to take her son to the cinema. Her car had broken down and had been in the shop for a week. So, after the movie, she had to call a taxi. It was already late, and buses were infrequent. Besides, she and Sam were tired. It had been a busy day. Soon, a gray car pulled up. Christine and Sam settled comfortably in the back seat. The driver, a stout man in a cap with a wide brim, greeted them hoarsely and confirmed the address. Everything was as usual. The car drove through the semi-empty city streets. There were few cars at this time. Christine and Sam were engrossed in discussing the movie and didn't immediately notice that the driver had turned the wrong way. Only much later, when fields flashed past the windows, did Christine realize. I don't understand. Are we taking the bypass? Not through the city? That's far. We need to go to Communard Street. That's the other way. The driver didn't answer. Instead, Christine heard a click. The man had locked the doors. Christine understood. Something was wrong. An unpleasant chill ran down her spine. What are you doing? Christine tried to make her voice sound firm and calm. The last thing she needed was to scare Sam. He had already sensed something was wrong. And then the driver turned around. Christine flinched. She recognized Alex. I think I just laughed then, Christine recalled, thoughtfully twirling a strand of her long hair around her finger. Ethan watched her intently, hanging on every word. She told the story so vividly that scenes from a movie played out before the guy's eyes, and here was the climax, the main villain revealing himself. Yes, Christine laughed, but it was a nervous laugh. The woman immediately understood. Things were bad. The familiar face didn't reassure her, but the opposite. Christine realized she had fallen into the trap of the strange, obsessed Alex. And the worst thing was, Sam was now in his power. What would happen to them next? The prospects were unclear and hazy. Immediately! Stop the car! Christine gathered all her willpower not to show fear. She remembered the influence she had had over this man before. Maybe it would work now too? After all, he had seemed ready to do anything for her. At least that's how it seemed. I'll stop, of course, but later. Alex was now looking at the road. Soon you'll understand that this is for the best. For whom? Christine asked, feeling hope fade. For you, for me, for him, for all of us. You'll see, we'll be happy together. Where are you taking us? To a very nice place. You'll like it there. Here Alex turned around and winked cheerfully at Sam. He sat frozen with fear. The boy understood. Something terrible was happening. But what exactly he didn't yet understand and was afraid to ask. The car drove further and further down the country highway. Other cars were encountered very rarely. It was dark outside the windows. Nothing could be made out. Christine had no idea even approximately where they were. A sticky fear churned in her stomach. Let us go, Sam finally whispered. The boy looked so frightened and pathetic that Christine's heart ached. Why, what for? Alex gently countered him. So far he wasn't showing aggression, but who knew what would happen next? I want to go home, Sam said honestly. And what's so good there? Alex asked. Mom rushes off to work in the morning. You hurry to school. Homework, tests, clubs. I even know you go swimming 3 times a week. Constant hustle. You hardly see each other. But with me, you'll be together all the time, just as children should be with their parents. I'll take care of you, I promise. Sam sighed and stared out the window. He tightly squeezed his mother's hand. His palm was sweaty and cold. Christine thought. Alex was taking them somewhere unknown. Apparently he had been following them for a long time. He even knew that Sam went swimming 3 times a week, and he had waited for them at the cinema, which meant he knew where they had gone. Judging by everything, Alex didn't intend to do anything bad, in his understanding, at least for now. That meant they needed to behave quietly and obediently, not to anger the sick man. And Christine no longer doubted that Alex was sick. She had noticed oddities before, bright clothes, inappropriate behavior. But earlier she had attributed it to a creative nature or being deeply in love. Christine chose a tactic. Wait, observe, don't provoke aggression, and then she would see how to proceed. Alex turned off the smooth road, and the car started shaking on bumps. Christine felt the bottom scrape against the grass. It seemed they were about to get stuck in a hole or mud, but apparently Alex knew the road perfectly. He drove confidently forward, muttering that they were almost home. Finally, the car stopped. Before unlocking the doors, he warned, "Don't even think about running. I have this." And the man, with a somewhat gentle smile, showed them a crossbow. Christine didn't know if it was real or a sports one, but it looked imposing, dangerous, and deadly. I'm very accurate. Alex was clearly proud of this. Then he unlocked the doors and ordered his captives to get out. They obeyed. Where else could they go? It was pitch black all around, not like in the city where outlines of objects were visible. Nothing could be made out. Christine realized they were in the forest. Alex took her hand, firmly, but strangely gently. And you, boy, hold on to Mom, or we'll get lost. Christine nodded. Sam had long since clung to her and was trembling with fear. The woman stroked her son's back reassuringly, promised that everything would be all right, although she herself had serious doubts. They walked for quite a while. The woman and boy stumbled, while the man walked steadily and confidently, clearly knowing the area well. Finally, they reached the cabin. Right in the middle of the forest stood something like a village house, a gable roof, shutters on the windows, even a porch with wobbly steps. What is this? Christine asked, surprised. A house in the middle of the forest looked too unnatural, like something out of a scary fairy tale. Oh, my grandfather and I built this a long time ago, Alex began to explain. They used to bring me to his village, and we loved walking in the forest. He taught me how to use a crossbow here, by the way. We built this house for a long time. Grandpa used to say, you never know. If there's a war, we'll have to hide in the woods. Christine concluded, Alex's illness was probably hereditary. It seemed his grandfather had also been a strange person. You know, we dug such a deep basement, Alex continued. We made a storehouse for canned food there, just in case. Come in. Alex opened the surprisingly sturdy door with a key and let his guests in. He followed them in and locked the door. He took a kerosene lamp from the cupboard, lit it, and Christine could finally look around. It was almost an ordinary room in a village house. In the center was a round table with bentwood chairs around it. In the corner was an old small sofa. Against the wall with windows was a tall, narrow wardrobe. Simple, painfully familiar interior. Christine had seen something similar at her aunt's in the village when she was a child. But the room was sharply different from ordinary living spaces. It was all because of the bars, with which someone, likely Alex himself, had fenced off part of the area. It resembled a holding cell for dangerous criminals in court, only larger. From the inside, this cage was divided by a solid brick wall from the floor almost to the ceiling. Did you and your grandfather build this too? Christine, unexpectedly, chuckled. It suddenly struck her as funny when she pictured this scene. A grandfather and grandson building brick walls and fencing off part of a room with bars. It seemed delusional, but also amusing. No, I did this myself, Alex admitted. I was preparing for your arrival. I even had to take time off work to get everything done. Christine understood that they would now be forced into these cages. She couldn't let that happen. There, behind bars, Christine would be defenseless, vulnerable. There would be almost no chance of escape. Why cages? We won't go anywhere anyway, Christine tried to convince Alex. Firstly, we don't know the way. Secondly, it's so cozy and quiet here with you. There's no one around. Why would we want to leave such a nice place? Sam watched his mother with wide eyes and remained silent. The woman saw that her son understood her tactic and was playing along.